Good afternoon and welcome. I'm delighted to see so many of you here with us this afternoon, for those of us who are on East Coast and Central Time. I'm Ann Curzan, Dean of the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts here at the University of Michigan. And it's really a pleasure to get to welcome all of you to the final event in this year's College and Beyond 2 Liberal Arts and Life Colloquium series. The series will continue next year with a new topic focusing on the links between liberal arts education and democratic engagement. So please keep an eye on your email for updates about next year. Today, though, we're here to consider making the case for liberal education, which is, of course, top of mind for many of us in our work. I'll begin by gratefully acknowledging the support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which generously funds this series and the College and Beyond 2 project. More on that project in a moment. I also want to thank the series co-sponsors at the University of Michigan, which include the Inter-University Consortium on Political and Social Research, the National Center for Institutional Diversity, the College of Engineering, the Educational Policy Initiative at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy, the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education at the School of Education, and I will say, of course, the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. I also want to thank the remarkable team here in LSA who have been organizing the events all year. A few details about today's events. A live transcript is being generated through Zoom, and you can click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen to view subtitles. The event is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the series website in the near future. Videos of past events are also available on the website. If you happen to be tweeting about today's event, consider using hashtag #CollegeandBeyond2, number 2, in your posts. I'm now very pleased to introduce our panel of distinguished speakers. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to do this introduction very briefly and forgo listing their many accomplishments, which can be found in their biographies linked on the Colloquium series website, and which could easily take me the rest of the hour. So I know that the speakers are now joining me on screen. We have joining us today, I want to welcome Rebecca Blank, who is the Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Douglas Haynes, who joins us from the University of California, Irvine, where he is Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Professor of History. Welcome to Ranu Khator, Chancellor of the University of Houston System and President of the University of Houston. And our final panelist is Provost Spiro, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs and Professor of Sociology and Public Administration at Georgia College and State University. It is really just such a pleasure to have all of you here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I'll do a little bit of framing and then turn it over to all of you for some opening remarks. The central question that we aim to address today is, how do we and how should we make the case for liberal education? So one way to make the case is through a focus on the outcome of liberal arts education through the effects it has on students' lives. This is often a question that students and their parents have as they embark on their undergraduate careers. What benefit will this education provide? And it's a very fair question. I'm going to say a few words about possible outcomes of interest, and then we'll invite each panelist to give brief remarks on the outcomes they think are most important and are most excited to learn more about. For the audience here, as questions occur to you, please send them to us through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be using those questions to facilitate the conversation. So claims for the value of a liberal education are often, I will say, expansive and focus broadly on the full lives that graduates lead. They're also often mostly rhetorical or anecdotal. The College and Beyond 2 project here at the University of Michigan is gathering data on the full breadth of long-term outcomes a liberal arts education is believed to provide through an alumni survey that is currently in the field. This survey asks alumni who earned a bachelor's degree in 2010 about their lives and is being taken by graduates of the University of Michigan and 6 partner institutions, including the institutions of some of our speakers, Georgia College and State University, the University of California, Irvine, and the University of Houston. By surveying graduates, the College and Beyond 2 project aims to bring into sharper focus the ways that particular college experiences shape the lives graduates lead, and to add heft and specificity to our claims about lifelong outcomes of liberal arts education. As we think today about outcomes and how they help make the case for liberal education, the areas in which the survey is collecting information can serve as a guide. So I'll just briefly talk about those. They include, first, health and well-being. So this is one way of asking about a life well lived, a life that is productive and meaningful and enables the individual to flourish. In asking about well-being, the survey asked graduates about how they cope with the demands of everyday life, how positive and confident or lonely and worried they feel, about whether they think they have learned and grown over the course of their lives, about their physical health, and more. Second, we know that employment and economic success are important outcomes of college education, and the survey aims to collect information about careers, including salary, but not only that. The survey asks graduates about the kind of work they do, including its most important activities or duties and what skills and qualities they're using on the job. It asks graduates how satisfied they are with their work. We're also interested in career trajectories, how careers develop over time, not just first jobs, and how graduates are adapting. Third is graduates' use of cognitive and non-cognitive skills. This is an important outcome to look at. Cognitive skills includes writing ability and critical thinking, 2 skills often at the center of arguments for liberal education. Non-cognitive skills acts as an umbrella term for dispositions and capacities not related to intelligence or acquired knowledge, sometimes referred to as socio-emotional skills. They include qualities like openness to diverse perspectives, empathy, self-knowledge, and sense of purpose. The fourth is arts and cultural engagement. This is a related outcome of interest. How often graduates read books for pleasure, do creative work like photography, and attend art exhibits or performances either in person or virtually. These qualities and behaviors relate to other claims often made for liberal arts education, that it enhances empathy and understanding of the human condition, and it prepares us for lifelong learning. And the fifth is civic engagement and political participation. Are graduates working for the public good by spending time volunteering in their communities or donating to charity? Did they vote in the November 2020 election or in last year's local elections? Did they get in touch with public officials or take part in protests or marches? Do they engage in or avoid political discussions with friends and family in person, on social media? How well do they think democracy is working today in the United States? So these are lifelong outcomes, and they capture many ways in which we hope liberal arts education prepares students to navigate the workforce, contribute to their communities, and participate in our democracy. We've asked our 4 panelists today to consider which of these outcomes they're most excited to learn more about. And with that, I will turn it over and begin with Rebecca Blank.
Thank you, Anne, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a great project, and I look forward to seeing all of the results that come out of it. So I'm an economist by background, so let me start by talking about economic outcomes, because for better or for worse, we live in a time where the evaluation of higher education is very economically focused, a very instrumentalist view of, well, if you get this degree, how much money are you going to make? Now, we can all decry that. We can talk about the importance of many other things, but we have to be able to make the economics argument. And the good news is that's a winning argument. You know, I don't know what's come out of your research. I haven't seen that yet. But I know that, for instance, we do regular surveys of the long-term outcomes of our liberal arts graduates. And, you know, they start when they leave college at a place that is near the median salary of the average American. You know, that's at age 22. And then you track them over time. And, you know, all of the economic research says that the returns to college have never been higher. It's one of the things I find, both ironic and distressing, is that the debate about the value of higher education is occurring at a time when the returns to college have never been higher. So, you've got to pay attention to the economic outcomes. But let me just say a word about some of these others, because I'm particularly interested in the non-cognitive skills and the life satisfaction. We are in a world where change is constant, and never has that been more obvious than over this last year and 2 months. The ability to cope with change, to be resilient, to be flexible, to feel life satisfaction even when the world is changing around you and you might be in a different place than you thought you'd be, strikes me as incredibly important to all of us, both as individuals as well as citizens in the country. And I think those outcomes, which are often under discussed, the non-cognitive skills, are, and how they relate to college and higher education. I'm really glad this project has taken that on, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
Great, thank you. And I'm really excited to dig into all of these comments. So next I will turn it over to Douglas Haynes. I'm afraid you're muted. Now our panel is complete.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciated the remarks by Chancellor Blank. It seems to me more than ever that this project is so important. It's fair to say that now universities remain as one of the last sets of institutions in society that are grounded in facts and truth and science, and an aspirational vision about the future. And so the liberal arts has taken on even more meaning now, particularly as universities have become more diverse, right? And so one example of that, and of course I'll navel gaze, UCI was founded in 1965, right? At the beginning of the Great Society. In 2016, it became a federally designated minority serving institution, right? Very often, our students are first in their family. And so now it's our responsibility, and this is true for the higher education landscape, to serve all of our students and our communities. And for that reason, what really resonates with me are the issue of civic engagement, right? Because at the heart of civic engagement, I think, are a set of competencies that I think that the project will sort of tease out. One is cultural dexterity. Many of our campuses are remarkably diverse. This is an amazing experiment in building capacity to navigate a world that is so diverse with different backgrounds and perspectives. And there are very few such institutions that exist like that in our country. The second is, and this is so important now in the wake of the insurrection of January 6th, confidence in our institutions of civil society. We simply cannot take our democratic institutions and rights for granted. And I think it's so important that our institutions help equip our students to have a better understanding of those rights and responsibilities in institutions. And finally, and this is often made quite clear in a very poignant way, with each killing of an African-American who's unarmed in police custody, it's important for us to think about how we are creating conditions for a future where people thrive. And again, universities play an integral role in exploring these questions, in providing public policy solutions so that all people have confidence in their institutions, confidence about the future, and above all, confidence in their ability to navigate this world.
So thank you. And I was thinking last fall, Van Jones was on our campus and talked about that the superpower is the ability to thrive in a diverse world. That's the superpower. So let me now turn the floor over to Ranu Khator.
Thank you, Anne. And it's a great project. I am very excited about it and just want to learn more. So let me just give you my perspective. I did my bachelor's degree in India, and I actually did it in liberal arts. I did not have any one particular major. I had actually 4 majors that I had to do, which included political science and psychology, literature, and education. I came here and then I did my master's and PhD in political science from Purdue University. But then I started teaching at University of South Florida. And it just so happened in my second year as a assistant professor, I was asked to teach a course in women's studies because a professor passed away very suddenly. I was teaching a course called Politics in Developing Countries, and they thought maybe they asked me, can you expand it and can you just teach women in developing countries? And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? So I said yes. I tell you, the reason I bring that one up is during that semester, reading the literature, getting deeper into the discussions and preparing for that class, I thought I grew up more than ever before. And the reason for that is even though I had liberal arts education, I think it expanded my horizons. It changed my screen from which I was viewing the world. It gave me empathy. It gave me an ability to really step in somebody else's shoes and see something. So I am most intrigued by non-cognitive skills. Of course, cognitive skills are important. I totally agree with Chancellor Blank that you have to have the economic reason to do it. But my belief has always been the liberal arts education gives you something that you just cannot find other way. And I would just end with saying that is in India in 9th grade, you have to choose at that time, whether you're going in science or commerce or liberal arts. My husband came from science side. I came from liberal arts science. And I don't know how many times throughout our 47 years of marriage that he has said, I wish I had taken more liberal arts courses, because he realized in many ways he actually used my angles and my screen to view certain problems that he had to find solution to as an engineer. So I am very proud of my education that I have, and I just never would think that you have to justify it, make a case for it, but obviously you do. So I'm very excited about the project and really interested about learning more so that what I felt I knew, I could sense it, I might have some proper way of making a case for it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that really powerful story that I think opens up a lot. I have many thoughts in response, but I will hold them so that I can turn the floor now over to Provost Spiro.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Chancellor Couture, these are very interesting comments and in many ways resonate with me as somebody who actually migrated to the United States from Greece. And when I was growing up and going to school there, I thought that Aristotle and Plato and Thucydides and all Homer and everybody across the globe was familiar and aware of those individuals. And when we were reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, I thought every kid was reading that. So when I came to the States, I was very surprised, as you noted a moment ago, that one has to rationalize or to argue in support of those opportunities to in terms of growth. So I really appreciate your comments. There are 2 areas that I thought from the list that I would be interested in knowing more in terms of the outcomes. And again, we're very proud of Georgia College to be part of the project, and we look forward to our continued participation. The first one is civic engagement and democratic participation. It's interesting if you look at the Pew Research Center and the work that they've done over the last, since 1950, they're looking at the level of trust that Americans have towards federal government. And back in late 1950s, we're looking at about almost 80% of Americans trusted the federal government. When we get to the 80s, we started to see a decline that has persisted in the since that time. And here we are today, we're looking at 15 to 20% of Americans in 2020 trust the government. And I think the federal government, I think that raises a lot of questions. And I think it raises a lot of questions about the role of the liberal arts. Just one of my questions would be, how can the liberal arts help us in terms of tackling this lack of trust in this major social institution? What can the survey reveal about these attitudes and the current discontent? So I think in addition to that, obviously, we look at the voter turnout. That becomes an issue. It's an issue, has consistently had stayed around 50%, around the 50th percentile. So the topic of civic engagement and democratic participation is of interest because the question is raised, what can we learn? What can the liberal arts help us to go back into a greater level of trust? The second item is employment and economic success. I was thinking about, I think all of us have heard about what became very famous. It was back in 2011 or so when Governor Scott at the time made reference to the state supporting anthropologists. You may remember that. I don't know if you remember that reference back there. The idea there is that why should a taxpayer foot the educational bill for an anthropologist who actually cannot find a job? So there's this issue of not being able to find a job with the liberal arts, and Chancellor Blank obviously addressed the issue in a sense. It's an important issue that needs to be addressed to make the case. At the same time, survey after survey, when you look at surveys, corporate leaders, all of them talk about the importance of liberal arts education or the skills that come from a liberal arts education and how those equip and support the professionals. Or we hear that there was a recent study that looked at what happens to economic success over time, that while liberal arts graduates take a little bit longer, eventually they reach and surpass those with degrees in other areas. So I guess the second area that I would be interested in finding out more is what is it that, why is that conflict that exists between this perception and this reality in those two particular areas?
So, okay, so many directions I could take this, and I want to invite the audience, please send in your questions and I will use those as well. One thing I'm thinking about that I think all of us are talking about in different ways, we speak to many different audiences as we make this case for the liberal arts. And I think that, are we making economic arguments? Are we making arguments about participation in civic democracy? Are we, how do we make those arguments? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from all of you, especially as we think about students and parents and they're making these choices. And I think about something, actually, the project is using this frame of cognitive, non-cognitive, and it had me think, like, I actually talk a lot about empathy. And I absolutely stole this quote from another dean. I would like to acknowledge that. But the quote is that empathy is not just a value, it's a skill. And it's actually a very difficult skill to hone over time. And Chancellor Couture, I think you were getting at this. I mean, it's why we read literature. It's why we study history. It's why we study other cultures, is to try to understand the world from perspectives that are not our own. I myself have worked very hard not to use things like soft skills, that term, because I think soft skills undersells some of these things that liberal arts education does that are actually incredibly hard to learn and to practice. And I find myself thinking about non-cognitive in sort of the same way of, do we sell ourselves short as we talk about a liberal arts education with some of this language? And I ask that as an open question as you all think about it. And let's start with students and their families. And this question, student and perhaps particularly students who are first in their families to go to college. And so Vice Chancellor Haynes, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you want to get us started there.
Thank you so much for that question. And the reason why I'm nodding vigorously is we're now in that space, and this is true elsewhere, where students are making decisions about where they want to attend. And increasingly, as I'm having conversations with many future students and their parents, I'm particularly struck by questions that Black families ask. And they're asking the question, will you take care of my child? Right. And so in many ways, like other campuses that are represented here, we offer, we like to believe, a wonderful educational opportunity. But that question that the parent asks is fundamentally, I believe, about the capacity for empathy throughout the organization. And so, in answer to your question, it's not enough that liberal arts are part of or liberal education is part of the core academic curriculum. It has to be conceived as being a part of the total experience, including the residential experience. Because you mentioned something that's so important, practice, right? And so we have to build that muscle memory around empathy, and it has to be intentional. And it matters as much to our career staff and faculty as it does to our students. And so in some sense, the university has to become a university within a university where all people learn these competencies through the liberal education.
So can I jump into this? I will say that I think the term liberal arts is not a useful term at this moment in time. People do not know what that means. When I'm talking to parents or students, the parents know what it means if their child goes to the engineering school or to the business school or to the education school. When you say they're going to major in the College of Liberal Arts, they don't know what that means. And coming up with some terms that have more innate meaning to parents and even to 18-year-old students, I'm not sure what they are. I've struggled with that. But liberal arts is too associated right now, for better or for worse, with humanities and arts. And people don't understand it includes mathematics and physics and economics and sociology and all of the others. So this term is a little problematic for us because it's not well defined in most people's heads. My second comment is that when I'm talking to parents and students, of course, I try to break out of their view of what liberal arts is. So I give them some what I think of as counter examples or counter to their intuition. And I often, for instance, will use the example of our philosophy department, where most people will say, philosophy, there's a really esoteric and not terribly helpful skill. Well, our philosophy department places a very high share of their students in some of the top technology companies in the country, because it turns out that following a logical chain, as you think about how one thing impacts another, which is at the center of how you often do philosophical reasoning, is incredibly helpful if you want to be hired by Google or by Amazon or by one of, you want to get people to start thinking openly that it's not the substantive topic that matters. It's the skills you learn and where they can take you.
So do others want to chime in? Yeah, Chancellor Spiro.
Chancellor Couture, I think, is speaking.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll just add to this. When I try to make a case, I tell them, think of it this way: that we're not preparing you here in this place for a market-ready, exit or graduation. We are preparing you for life, not just for market. If you want just the market preparation, you could do a vocational, a very planned program. But that is the beauty of liberal arts. And then I try to give them examples, which this example, works quite a bit. And that is, I said, we are in Houston. A lot of people here, we have so much of intake in freshmen who come actually from greater Houston area itself. We say, this oil and gas industry. I said, we've got Energy Advisory Board. And we have 28 of the CEOs of energy companies, all these top companies, you can name it. And they say all of them are serving on our Energy Advisory Board. Every single meeting, they said, we need people who understand international context, who understand how do you negotiate, who understand how do you bring people to the table. We want people who have knowledge about public policy and its impact. And it's not just about engineers. Even after you do engineering, they say that that's who they're looking for, or if you're looking for managers. And I try to tell them that if you build your base, every house is built, you have a foundation, and then you have a structure that everybody can see. Your foundation comes from that strong base of liberal arts. If that foundation is weak, no matter how nice and beautiful this structure is, it's not going to last very long. So don't be afraid about building that foundation and investing in it. I mean, generally, that's what I try to say, and I do see heads nodding. So I think that is getting across, and we have had so much increase in our liberal arts, programs. And then I also try to tell them, look, this is what my degree is. And I'm telling you that it can take you places you just don't know today. And generally it does work.
Yeah. There are a couple of thoughts that come to my mind in listening to Dr. Haynes start out with the notion that it has to go outside the classroom in many ways. And I think we're talking about experiential education or experiential learning. How do we weave the liberal arts outside the classroom environment, that they become embedded into the everyday experience of our students? One of the things that, and I come from a smaller, obviously, we're a public liberal arts institution in the state of Georgia. And so we've embarked on an effort to engage our students in high impact practices. We expect our students to complete 5 high impact practices, which takes them obviously outside the classroom environment, undergraduate research, capstones, study abroad or study away, those type of experience. But it adds a whole other dimension to the liberal arts education that it's what we believe is to be much richer in that regard. So I do agree that it has to come outside the classroom. At the same time, an observation by Chancellor Blank about the identity crisis, and I do agree with that. There is an identity crisis. The language, the appropriate language of communication is not there. Students, and this is where I think faculty can play an important role. We need to identify what are the learning outcomes that tie to liberal arts skills in the classroom. So when you complete a course in A, B, or C, what are the skills, critical thinking skills, writing skills, etc., and then communicate those to students. So when students come out of that environment, it was not just a course on poetry, hypothetically, it's more to it. It's building capacity that they can take that and move forward and talk with a prospective employer or talk about what they've gained as a result of this academic experience. So I think there's a lot of value to thinking about our courses differently and helping. It's a difficult task to, the identity crisis that I mentioned a moment ago, but we have to really pay attention to that because parents want it, students want it, media wants it, government wants it, everybody wants to hear more about that.
Well, so I'm struck in your question of sort of how would we articulate for any given course, what is this, how is this enhancing your skill set? And I was on a committee rethinking the future of undergraduate education here at the University of Michigan, and this idea, which I am still intrigued by, of if we make the argument that we're working toward the common good, which is fundamental to this, what would happen if on every syllabus each of us made a statement about how does learning the material for this course help you contribute to the common good? Because I think that also beyond skills like writing skills or particular kinds of thinking skills, it gets you toward democratic civic engagement and appreciation of the arts, and potentially could have us thinking capaciously about all the things that you might be taking away from this particular course that could contribute to the common good.
Yeah, interesting.
So, Couture, great.
Sorry, just keep muting it. I was just saying, I like that idea, what you said, Anne, but it might lead to a very interesting discussion of what common good is.
Yes. I agree. Well, and we have one comment here in the chat that I think I want to read. So one worry that I have, and that I think we should all have, is that there is no single thing that we all mean by liberal arts education. And I think you all are getting that. As a result, parents, students, legislators, and others are confused about just what we are selling under this label. I'm happy to hear the panelists react to that. But let me say that what I tell parents, students, legislators, and others is that it is an education that involves depth on one methodology for understanding the world, a major, and a breadth that provides acquaintance with other methodologies for understanding the world, so-called gen ed. We value this because we want employees, cities, synagogues, et cetera, to be populated with people who know how to understand and interrogate the world through many different methodological lenses, so that we are better able to solve complex problems and navigate complex democracies. Beautifully put, whoever put that in the chat. Do any of you want to react to that comment?
Yeah.
So, it's the interesting question of what is the argument for having majors, right? Why do you learn a specific body of knowledge if you want people to learn these more general sets of writing, reasoning, numeracy type skills? And, it goes back to sort of what does teaching accomplish, and how do you take knowledge in one area, go into depth in it, and by learning a great deal about the models and the reasoning and the approaches used in this discipline, how does that give you multiple lenses, as the commenter said? How does that open you up to look at the world in other ways? And of course, for some people, they get completely caught in that way of looking at the world and become quite narrow. I won't mention any disciplines, but it does happen. And for some people, and it's one thing that really happens, I think, in some of the humanities. By studying one thing in depth, you actually start seeing many other ways to look at the world. And it's always a fascinating question of how majors interact with this whole idea of a broad liberal arts undergraduate major and education.
And answer your question, there's two thoughts that come to mind. I think one is, as you look at the sort of trajectory of a young person, that in some sense, they're continually getting insight about the experience that they've had during a formative period in their lives. And so even what constitutes a valued experience changes over time. And I want to go back to a point that I raised before, because I think it's obvious, but it bears repeating, that increasingly nearly half of our students are first generation, right? We simply can't assume that when it comes to having an appreciation, let's say, of the arts, broadly construed, that they're necessarily coming in with it with a breadth and depth. And so that means that universities have to invest in creating those opportunities, right? And so it might not occur in the classroom, but by having no or low cost tickets to attend events gives them that exposure, right? And so, we have an Illuminations program that does just that. It basically makes it free, just so that more of our students can encounter, interact, because it's a lot easier to sort of conceive of liberal education, if you've had an experience with it, right? Even though you may be majoring in something else.
Well, I think this relates to actually a question that just came in, and I think this is also building Provost Spiro on what you were saying. So the students struggle to understand and communicate the value and relevance of their educational experiences. Transcripts do not communicate nearly enough about our impact. So much of the university experience is entirely absent. Most high impact practices, everything co-curricular. And I've noticed most students vastly undersell their experiences until you work with them directly to learn to tell their story to prospective employers and others. So I'd love to hear, because I think it's a great comment of how do we help students tell the story that we're also trying to tell? So Provost Spiro, I don't know if you want to take a shot at that.
Yeah, I simply share that it's so important, I believe, that the liberal arts education to transcend itself outside the classroom. I mean, we've all been in the classroom, and sometimes it could be some of the most exciting experiences and most intellectually rewarding engagements in the classroom, and other times they tend to be the most challenging and most boring experiences that we have in the classroom. and that's the truth, because we've all gone through these experiences. So now, that doesn't mean that what happens in the classroom cannot contribute to building the liberal arts capacity. Absolutely, it can. If we're more intentional with it, obviously, right? And we talked a little bit about outcomes and how that can be weaved into it, and give the language to the students to be, and let the students know from the beginning that, this is going to assist you in this, that, the other way. Utilize this resource. But I think what's happening outside the classroom can be very, very powerful because students spend just an enormous amount of time outside the classroom, develop relationships, friendships, interactions that are just go within the campus in ways that sometimes we can't even predict in outside the campus in so many other ways. So thinking about it, and again, as I mentioned earlier, we've embraced the high impact practice model, and we've tried to, and it's hard work because you have to engage the faculty, you have to engage the students, you have to engage our staff, the entire university to try to move forward in that direction. But we believe in the end, it'll have the capacity to transform our institution, but also transform the lives of our students.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
I'd love to invite others to jump in here of sort of how we work with students on this piece.
I think it has to start with us before we expect how students translate and sell their skills or identify their skills. It has to start with us. And you said something before that, what if for every course we talk about how it contributes toward common good? Okay. Whether it's common good, whether it's about wholesomeness of life, whether it's about transformation of the way you think. If every class, if every professor is able to communicate the impact that it would have, the course, I think it would be very powerful. I think that also will give the students a language, a framework, a screen to then put their skills that they are learning, which are not necessarily so obvious, to really give them words and to present that to the employer.
I love the way you put that, because it also, with your frame in that example, it's then on the faculty member to start with the framing, right? Of how do I see this class? What do I see this class contributing? To share that with the students, as opposed to putting on the students to sort through it and figure it out entirely without framing from the faculty. So,
one of the things I think that we do very poorly in the liberal arts colleges historically has been preparing people to understand how what they're doing in college links into their careers. If you're an engineer, it's clear. If you're a business person, it's much clearer. If you're, a nurse learning, but if you're a math major or an art history major or a sociologist, most people are not going to go on in that field. So the question is, how do they think about taking these skills and preparing them for a career? And, at Wisconsin, we've actually really worked to put together a career advising center that involves our alums and a lot of other people, really bringing our students in and saying, okay, here's what people with political science majors do. And, go listen to this little, we've got 10 little vignettes of political science majors 10 and 20 years out who say, here's how I used my education and this is what I did. And they're in all sorts of different jobs, and sort of giving students that sense of possibility of understanding how what they're doing here links to what they might want to do in the future. I think particularly for liberal arts, we've not done that well historically.
Yeah, and if I may, I want to add that I agree that our academic programs play an indispensable role in facilitating the exposure and engagement around the larger concept of liberal education. But I also want to argue that there's a place for the general campus to really lean in to difficult issues, precisely to make clear and evident why engaging with the challenges in our world matter. And so just one example, after Charlottesville in 2017, we launched a Confronting Extremism initiative that mobilized our research, teaching, and service mission to confront extremism. And the reason why is because we simply can't react. And increasingly, in the data show that there is a real desire to learn more about the fault lines of our society, but there's so few places where people can actually learn about them without feeling threatened or otherwise harmed. And so I'm convinced that liberal education is fundamental to creating a sense of safety. Safety to encounter new ideas, safety to equip yourself to be that citizen in the world who can understand that free speech is both a virtue and a value, but you need to be able and comfortable to engage with difficult ideas. And that's something that's fundamental to the campus. It's fundamental to liberal education. And I think it's something that we should embrace more of.
Do others want to build? I mean, I think it's an incredibly important point, and appreciate you expanding it to the campus, thinking about the role of liberal education within the campus as a whole.
I think I can, I just like to expand on this point itself. So this is about creating value, and that's what we heard from Douglas. I think sometimes we forget how what it appears it becomes important in terms of empowerment. Let me just give example of space, for instance. Most of the campuses, all the new buildings, I mean, I know here legislature funded every time it had to be a STEM building, for instance. And liberal arts just takes the back seat, no matter for what purpose, whether it's a college or whether it's in general liberal arts. And after building so many of these, I said to myself, you know, this core of the campus where most students actually learn to be life ready, to be citizens. If this place seems neglected, then there's a lack of empowerment, I would say, because it speaks, you know, as to the space also speaks to itself. We just took on a project of taking all of these liberal arts buildings that were built 40, 50 years ago and just renovating all of them. And the excitement that it created was very different, you know, and I think we need to think about that a small amount of investment in liberal arts and liberal education can actually go far, and not just for those who are in those disciplines, but also for those who are taking general education, you know, from all across. So this is valuable. This is something important.
So I'm going to need to move us into the final portion. I want, Provost Spiro, was there something you wanted to add there?
I'm okay. Thank you, Anne.
So I'm going to, at this moment, invite President Mark Schlissel from the University of Michigan to join us on the screen. And we are, for this last portion, hello, President Schlissel, thanks for being here.
Hi, Anne, and welcome, colleagues, panelists. Nice to see you, Becky, as always.
So this last part, given that the College and Beyond project is going to continue, is really articulating for ourselves and for them, what do we want to know as they continue with this survey? And I will here just start with a question that came in the Q&A, which is, how do we know that non-liberal arts students do not obtain the same non-cognitive skills? What's the bench? How are we benchmarking this?
See, you know, that's a really great question, Anne. And you know, although I was a biochemistry major in college, I did it in the context of a liberal arts environment. And I can tell you, more of my current job relies on my liberal arts education than it does on my biochemistry education, even in the middle of a pandemic. What I'd add to the conversation is it's the liberal arts skill set that I like to focus on. You know, reading carefully for content, being able to write and speak clearly, communicate clearly, think critically, have sensitivity to context and culture, to be creative problem solving. You know, that's a toolbox that's adaptable to every possible profession. You know, perhaps put the more technical ones aside, but the world's changing so quickly. Ways that people are going to spend their lives 20 years from now don't exist today. That providing this toolbox for our students, I think, is the great gift of the liberal arts. And what I was hoping the project would consider doing is helping us find ways to measure our success at doing this. So for example, now I'm with a group at the AAU that's talking about pushing and shoving on US News about the pernicious aspects of their rankings. most of which consist of sort of entry metrics as compared to what we do for the students and how they exit. It would be a great project to define what the liberal arts skill set is, and I just put out some very common examples, and find ways to measure our students on the way in the door and on the way out of the door. And that would capture both the in the classroom learning, but also the outside the classroom learning that's the sort of core of a residential academic community. And we'd be able to really say, are we living up to our ideals without waiting the 20 or 30 years to see if they've had a life well lived?
Thank you. And I think incredibly important to be thinking about metrics because they're so powerful, right? In terms of things like rankings. So Provost Spiro, you are next in what you want to know.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm thinking about the in-classroom, out-of-classroom benefits of a liberal arts engagement. I noticed that the questionnaire, the very lengthy questionnaire of about 35 pages that's part of the project, has questions about study abroad, completion of a capstone, working with faculty on research. So I would be interested in knowing more about how those variables intersect with the in-classroom experience. Again, those are out of the classroom engagements for students. So it'd be very much interesting to see what is the impact that those levels of participation on the part of students, how do they compare? So I thought that would be very, very interesting to solidify again that toolbox and how the toolbox comes together and how it's utilized by our students.
Mm-hmm. Chancellor Couture.
Well, I think I'll just stay with my theme of this whole cognitive and non-cognitive skills because I am still very much intrigued by it. And just like I said in the opening, that how I can say today, when I grew in such a short time, how I grew in my screen or the framework by teaching that one course which was outside of my boundary or comfort zone and just gave me a different perspective. How can we measure how can we help the students see that in some ways they have grown and what are those skills and how can we tap that for alumni? I know the road to reaching for liberal arts majors, road to reaching somewhere where you are using more of your liberal arts skills, it still has a middle, the whole journey there. And through the journey, they may struggle a little bit more going here and there, but along the way, they also have more capacity to learn really a lot more, absorb a lot more, and then they reach to a point where they're able to use more. So I don't know how to measure those non-cognitive skills and what impact liberal education made, but I think that would be very powerful.
Great. Vice Chancellor Haynes. I'm afraid you're muted.
Again, I began early on with comments about the importance of civic engagement, but I want to provide wrap-up comments on the importance of well-being. And I want to be very specific. At the outset, I talked about the importance of universities as engines of inclusive excellence that's reflective of the growing number of students of color who are participating. This project, with its focus on wellness, will give us an opportunity to determine the extent to which that liberal education is correlated with an improving sense of well-being among underrepresented populations. What I hope will come out of this is that it will mobilize the health sciences to look at the ways in which universities working with liberal education can improve the health outcomes of underrepresented populations. You have 4 years and plus to build that capacity for wellness and hopefully change these health metrics that we've seen during COVID that are consistently describes differential experiences. And so I think this project, through studying the liberal education, can have an impact in improving and changing health outcomes.
So I think that's a beautiful point. And I would say, and it requires all of the liberal arts to do that.
Yes.
right? That when we think about all the fields and disciplines and areas of expertise, we need all of them at the table to do that. Chancellor Blank.
So I'm very interested in the mechanisms issue about where these outcomes come from and why they are better. You know, we sort of often talk about come to our wonderful liberal arts universities and some magic will happen and all these good things will be true in your life. And I can tell the story for some of the outside the classroom experiences, right? Why does going study abroad build some of these skills? Why does volunteering, why does participating in student organizations? But I'm very interested in the classroom mechanisms. How does studying a specific area of knowledge, how do you teach that specific area in such a way that it leads to some of these outcomes? How do you teach a specific area in such a way that you create resiliency and flexibility and curiosity? And you know, how does that over time lead to greater life satisfaction or better health? And you know, that's a hard question. But you know, if we're going to understand the mechanisms, the outcomes that are here, I think we really have to look at what is the translation from what we do in the classroom in a liberal arts college, and how is that unique to liberal arts? Your commentator is absolutely right. It may happen just as well if I went to a technical college, but then you want to say, what is it that's happening inside those classrooms that is leading to those outcomes later in life? And I just love to have those mechanisms opened up more and modeled in some way and tested.
So thank you all. And I'm going to capture one comment that came in the questions, I think, of something people are hoping to know, which is how might this inform how we do career services support in the liberal arts? That we have a couple comments in here of sort of students don't always find that this serves them well. How could we use the voices of those CEO alums more to speak to the value and importance of the liberal arts? How could we make sure that companies don't screen out liberal arts majors in the beginning? And I'm also thinking, you know, this question of access and equity, of how could we use this kind of support for students to help them major in what they love, feel confident in that, feel like they can explain what they've gotten, and have access to those alums. That is a piece of the picture. It's something we're thinking about a lot here at Michigan. So I see that I would love to keep talking with all of you about this for the next couple of hours, but it is somehow already just about 3 o'clock. So I want to thank all of you for making time in your very busy days to come here and step back and talk about the liberal arts and talk about this project. I really appreciate your excitement about it and your questions, and I know the whole team is here listening and taking notes so that we can continue to do the analysis and share the results so that we can all use it to continue to make the case that each of us is making individually, and we can continue to work together to make that case collectively for why this education matters so much to an increasingly diverse set of students and families. And that's why this, you know, one of the many reasons why this matters so much. So thank you so much to our audience as well for being here. This has really been a treat for me, and thanks to all. Have a very good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.